Welcome everyone in another course from ChatGPT University. Today we are going to see and learn how you can get started with SQL using the powers of ChatGPT. Let me quickly touch upon the agenda for today's tutorial. Firstly, we are going to show you how you can make a week by week plan of learning SQL using ChatGPT. Secondly, we are going to practice SQL with no installation. And last but not the least, I'm going to show you how you can prep for SQL interviews and practice for free using ChatGPT. All right, so this is the ChatGPT user interface. Now, before we get started, I want to talk a little bit about structured query language or SQL. It is the most popular programming language for storing and processing information in a relational database. And a relational database stores information in tabular form with rows and columns representing different data attributes and various relationship between the data values. SQL is so popular that it got standardized in 1986 by the American National Standards Institute, ANSI. Uh, Now, it's important to understand ANSI SQL is a specification, not a particular product. It's a document describing the official features of the SQL language. And then every brand of SQL implements a subset of ANSI SQL. And there are so many commercial and open source implementation of ANSI SQL. For example, Oracle, Microsoft SQL Server, DB2, MySQL, PostgreSQL, and hundreds of others. Now, with that brief introduction, let's get started with learning SQL using ChatGPT. So let's start with requesting a roadmap for learning SQL. And if you see it does a good job in starting from the basics of learning how to select from tables, how to join tables, mastering subqueries, how you can create and modify database objects, uh, how you can use aggregate functions and window functions. Um, and it talks about practicing, right? That's very, very important. Just like any programming language, you need to keep practicing SQL to master it and also to understand how you can write optimized SQL queries. Now, this is a great starting point, but let's uh, dig a little bit deeper, right? So let's put a timeline to our learning so to keep ourselves accountable. So I'm saying it to give me a weekly plan for learning SQL for 1 month. So in a way, I am asking it that within a month, how I can master most of the basics and some of the advanced concepts of SQL. So if you see, it's taking 5 days in a week, and it's kind of giving you line by line the topics. And this is great, right? Now, so let's dig one level deeper, how you can use it to learn the concepts without even going to internet or YouTube to search. So I'm going to start here to understand to get to know how we can use the basics of SQL syntax and queries. And if you see, it's also giving me an example, which is great. Uh, and by the way, towards the end of the course, I'm going to show you how you can create a schema and practice all of this for free without any installation in your laptop or desktop. Now, it's very important to understand the basics of database design. Database design is a field by itself. Again, you need years of practice, but you need to at least understand the principles and the fundamentals uh, of how you can design your database, right? How you can define the relationship, the entities, and the attributes, uh, and how you can create a data model, uh, entity relationship data model, how you can normalize your data, which is super important, uh, which is essentially a process of organizing the data in your database to minimize the data redundancy and improve data integrity. Again, you can dig deeper. So normalization, for example, is a very, very important topic. It's a favorite among interviewers. When I interview, I obviously ask about normalization to understand whether the candidate is interested and is kind of taking a peek in the fundamentals uh, of learning database, right? And there are several type of normal forms, kind of gives you a definition, but um, I think a good way to understand normalization is to understand it using examples. So once it finishes, I'm going to ask it, can you give me some examples of different normal forms? And this is where it starts giving me a table and its uh, columns and kind of shows me the difference between different normalization normal forms. One thing to note here is in this particular tutorial, I'm not trying to explain SQL or explain normalization. While I can do that, I'm essentially uh, showing you how you can fish for yourself, right? How you can use it to self-learn. And then there are so many tutorials and papers and YouTube videos where you can go dig deep into these subjects, but this gives you a great, great starting point, better than any tutorial, any video in the world. So we are going to dig just a little bit deeper before we start practicing the hands-on things. So the DDL is a data definition language. It's a way you can, create, modify, and delete database objects. Again, if you see here, the answers are very, very comprehensive. It gives you a great example, which you can start readily with, right? Which you can understand it, and it explains the examples that it gives. So this is a great starting point. Let me show you here at this point how you can get started writing these SQL queries and designing schemas and tables. So there is this great open source uh, website, and I'm going to share with you the link where you can start writing your SQL queries, right, for free. It's a notebook based experience, and you can just run the queries. Now, let's quickly try to create a schema, right? So what I'm going to ask it is, I'm going to give it a schema, which is right here. And I'm going to also show you where you can get this schema. Uh, and I'm asking it to generate me some table DDLs and sample insert statements. And this schema is loosely based upon Microsoft's AdventureWorks schema. So if you see it, it gives me the DDL and also gives me some sample insert statements in the DDL inside the table. So if I just copy the code here, I can go here This is a create table statement. I just created the table, and then I can insert some rows in the table. And then obviously using the same interface, I can I can query the table, right? It also gives you a graphical way to visualize the data. Uh, might not be super useful for this simple query, but you can create and play around with it, create joins, subqueries, um, window functions right here, right, without downloading or installing anything in your local. So kudos to the folks who have developed it and made it open source. Now, uh, with that, let me show you my favorite website where I would practice SQL questions for any interview prep, but also to understand uh, this SQL nuances and the subject a little bit better. So it's sqlzoo.net, and here obviously you can look at the basics. It's a great tutorial, but right here, if you look at the assessment section, if you click here, you will see that again, it's this one is based on Microsoft's AdventureWorks database. It gives you a schema, and then it gives you several questions on the schema, right? And you can answer the question right here, and it will tell you whether it's correct or not. So let's start with this one, right? So if I just copy this schema, and this is a schema, by the way, I used for this for creating these tables. So if I say it, given this SQL schema, let's just copy one answer, right? And uh, this is where ChatGPT shines. It works as your friend, as your tutor, as you're learning with it. So I'm saying show all the addresses listed for modular cycle systems. So if you see, it just joins the customer address and customer, and let's run this code. So if you see here, the difference between this code and this code, they're similar, but the difference is it wants it in this format, right? So what we are going to do, we're going to select this and just put some table alias, and hopefully that should do it. And then let's just run this. Okay. So yeah, this should be alias ca c ca address, right? So one thing is it progressively, if you go here, it progressively gets harder. And I would say this is a great place to practice the SQL questions, understand database design. So overall, this would help you in learning the subject at greater detail, greater depth, and also in your interview prep. That brings us to the end of this tutorial session. Thank you for joining us and giving us your valuable time. And I hope that this tutorial helps you. Please let me know in the comments what else you want to see, where we can make this presentation better. Uh, and I appreciate your patronage. Please like and subscribe for daily contents. Thank you so much.